At the Heart of Glass podcast, we want this to be the safest listening and viewing experience possible for everyone. So that being said, today's episode talks about gun violence. So if you're sensitive to that topic, we've put the minute markers in the description below. We hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Heart of Glass podcast, the show that takes a deeper, more in-depth look at the wonderful people who make up the heartbeat of our Glass City. We are once again filming at Toledo Spirits, our wonderful sponsor, and if you haven't had a chance yet to try their Heart of Glass vodka, please make sure to do that. They put real strawberries in it. It's absolutely delicious. If that's not your jam, they have a variety of other wonderfully in-house made liquors, and they recently released their summer menu, so make sure to check that out. Today's guest worked for Toledo Public Schools for 17 years and is now the owner of Serenity Health and Wellness Center, as well as Serenity Nail Salon and Spa in Maumee. She is a motivational speaker who presents all over the United States and internationally, even as far as Austria and Germany. She has authored 3 books, and for the last 7 years, she's had a weekly segment on 93.5 WRQN. It's called Life Coach Tuesdays with Dr. D. She dealt with a lot of adversity in her childhood, and now she dedicates her life to helping others overcome their obstacles and reach their maximum personal and professional potential. So Glass City humans, I give you Dr. Deetra Hickey. Deetra, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We have known each other in passing for years, thanks to Bars Public House and my involvement musically and you being a regular patron there. And I was just telling Tiernan, our producer and videographer, it's so funny how you can know someone for years, but truly not know them and not know their involvement with the community. So when I approached you about the podcast, I did not know that you owned Serenity and your involvement in the community overall. So I'm so excited to get to know you better because I don't really know you that well. So that excites me.
Well, thank you. And likewise, I hear your beautiful voice, but it's always nice to get to know people on a deeper level.
It really is. And to get to know people in a different format from what you're used to knowing them as, because it's so, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, it's so easy to pigeonhole people in your mind because you know them from one specific avenue.
Right, like, wow, she likes to drink a lot. And now you're going to get to know me better.
Exactly.
Not that you were wrong, but.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to dig in with you, and I'm excited to help you share your story to a wider format here in Toledo, because while I know you're very well traveled and have spoken in front of many large groups, not everybody knows you in that format.
Right.
So I'm excited for us to be able to share your story on a wider scale here, specifically in Toledo.
I love it. T-Town is my heart.
Absolutely. So you were born in Toledo in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
And being a lifelong Toledoan, you've seen our city grow and evolve quite a bit over the years. So what's one major change that you've witnessed over the years that makes you hopeful for the future of the Glass City?
I think the biggest change is the T-Town pride that I personally do feel that I've always had, but instead of defending, I mean, you still have to defend once in a while, but there's more of, you have more team players. I think people have really stepped up to being proud of their city and doing what I did with Serenity, like, oh, we don't have a wellness center in this town. You don't like the looks of some of the places. I'm gonna open something and do something about it and contribute to our city instead of whining about it and complaining about it. So I think the evolving attitude towards our city, the pride that we have, is really what I've seen the culture change over the years. And I love it. And there's been some diehards, you know, like me and probably you, that have been proud all along, but just like a sports team, sometimes, you know, they're fair weathered fans, and then all of a sudden when they start winning, they're like, yay. But there's a lot of people that are born and raised in Toledo that have been proud all along and love seeing it evolve and grow. And you just go to certain places like this one and you're like, yes, Toledo, keep on doing it. Keep on, you know, when people come in town to visit, you're proud and you actually don't have time to take them to all of the cool places that we have. So
that's so true.
I love it.
I agree with what you said about being diehard, because I feel like so many people who were either born and raised or who have been a part of the Toledo community for years and years and are very enthusiastic about it, have this innate desire to give back and make it a better place, because we see all this growth happening around us, and it's really hard to not catch on to the contagious nature of that and just want to improve it. And that's a huge part of why we wanted to have you on, because you're one of those people that is helping to help the city grow and evolve and continue to add to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you faced an extreme amount of adversity as a child, which from what you've described, it seems like that's been the driving force behind you wanting to continue to help other people grow and move through situations that might not completely mirror yours, but anyone that's been through a significant amount of diversity. So to give our listeners some background, you experienced a home invasion as a child, and together with your sister witnessed your parents being shot 8 times. And then that instantly paralyzed your father. How does someone so young process such a horrific event?
Well, to be completely honest, I think the answer is you don't. And I don't know if it's possible. And that's why it's such a critical growth time to have to just kind of have that innate resilience that hopefully you have, because some don't. And you are going to go through struggles like I did. I mean, I had night terrors all growing up. I was the type of student that the teachers wished I got the flu, so I wouldn't show up. I was not that kid that could sit still or stop talking or pay attention. And so I don't think I did process it. Counseling wasn't really a thing, not to make myself sound super archaic, but it really, 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't really
I don't
prominent.
think that makes you sound archaic at all, because I think we see it through the pulse of media now. There is such a strong focus on mental health awareness and on working on your mental health. So I don't think that's archaic at all, because I feel like it's only been more recently in the past however many years that there's really been a push for that.
I agree. And even 10 years ago, when I was a school counselor, and they were like, okay, you'll be at this school this day and this school this day, and you're at a school 1 to 2 days a week, and I'm like, do they not have problems the other days of the week?
Right.
And so we still have a long way to go. But I guess to answer your question, not to be cliche, but it was just a matter of time and going through the struggles that the adversity brought you from someone who couldn't process that information, and I didn't understand what I did wrong and why I kept getting punished, because obviously there's more to just the trauma. I mean, there comes the financial challenges as a family, and the judgment from everybody, and people couldn't come over to our house, and the school, the way I'm treated by teachers, and it's just this whole snowball effect. And when I was 21, and not to fast forward, but that's actually when I realized I had to start processing and making some decisions.
I love that you said that, because I think it draws a significant spotlight on the fact that everybody's healing journey and ability to process major events, especially traumatic events, is different. You can't really put a specific timeline on it. And for some people, you have to compartmentalize an extremely traumatic event, and you may not be able to revisit it and fully dig into it. So I think you're a really good example of what most people experience when you're a kid. That's really hard to process a significant event like that.
Yeah, and I don't want people putting pressure on themselves. Some people look at me or what I've accomplished or who I am now, and trust me, I still have my issues. I mean, I always joke and say my best client is my mirror, because I can dish it, but when it comes to perspective and resilience, I still lose it too, even now. So I don't want people thinking, oh, well, it's just easier for some people than other people. I'm just not that person.
Right.
So it's not easy for anybody, and it's just figuring out what that journey looks like and how to tackle it and conquer it to get yourself to a healthy place where you're having more good days than bad days.
Most definitely. So thinking about the continuation of that part of your story, you said that your mother, who had multiple sclerosis, ended up recovering from the shooting, but then the physical and mental stress, which some people don't realize that trauma extends far beyond just the event and has such a physical effect on your
Yes.
body and mentally. And you said that stress caused her MS to progress, and she too ended up paralyzed, leaving you as the primary caregiver from 11 to 21.
Yeah.
So at the time, how did you cope with watching your mother experience a significant decline in her disease?
To be completely honest, that was more traumatic to me than
Was
the
it?
isolated incident of the shooting. It was awful. I mean, it was, and also to be clear, I feel that stress manifested within her from what I know now, and made her MS progressive. But I am not a medical doctor, so I am not saying that is 100%, but that is my assumption, because she did end up getting very, very sick when she was diagnosed in her 20s. By the time she was 40, she was in a wheelchair. So she did live with it on and off flare-ups, and in and out of the hospital. And then by 45, she was completely bedridden. And at 48, she passed away. And those 8 years, just seeing your mother completely decline, where MS attacks your central nervous system,
Yep.
so it takes one kind of body part at a time. And now this isn't for everybody. There are advancements now, and their body deals with MS differently.
You're
There's
right.
some people
Yeah.
that live fully normal lives, so just as a disclaimer there. But when you have progressive, like my mother did, she ended up having a feeding tube and the catheter, and couldn't speak and couldn't move, and eventually couldn't smile, had the breathing treatments for 3 to 5 years until she finally passed away. And I don't know of anything too much more traumatizing that somebody can go through watching someone that you love and admire. And she passed away at my age right now, and she looked just young and had a positive attitude through the whole thing, which to this day I don't get, but she was an angel. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to be her caregiver, but it definitely creates some post-traumatic stress disorder.
I bet. I think it's really hard to watch somebody that you care very deeply about break down like that, specifically a parental figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I disclosed to you that my mom also has multiple sclerosis, and she got diagnosed when I was quite young, and she has secondary progressive. So she does have that steady decline. However, thinking about it, I can just imagine with the natural decline that you see with certain stages of MS, if you were to couple that with a very defining traumatic event like that, how that could indeed speed up that decline.
Yes, absolutely. So it's at 21, I definitely had a decision to make, because I was a pretty angry person.
Well, especially since you were being put in a position where you were having to parent your parent, that's a difficult position for anyone to be in, especially when it's the nature of having your parent decline because of a disease.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
So you said that after your mother passed, you had a choice to either use that adversity as a crutch or to push through and use it to strengthen and help others. And it's evident to me through what you shared in your story that you definitely chose the latter and chose to let that fuel you for good. So thinking about that and the trajectory your life has taken, what advice would you give to other people that have experienced significant adversity to help them use that experience for good, as opposed to maybe turning to more unhealthy coping mechanisms, which in my opinion, it's understandable when people do that, because I think when you experience trauma, no matter what it is, there isn't a handbook for how to deal with it. And oftentimes people do turn towards more destructive methods of coping. So what advice would you give to someone to avoid that?
First of all, we have to make the decision that we're not going to live in that bitterness, because I do think that there are some people unintentionally, they feel like that's their way of, I don't want to say getting attention, but that's what's defining them. Like they don't feel they have anything else to define them that's as prominent. And so they just kind of use that, and like I said, use that as a crutch. And hey, I have a built-in excuse when I want to be lazy or when I don't feel like stepping up and making a difference. And by all means, this isn't most people, but I think first and foremost, we have to make the decision that that's not going to be our path, and that we want to be a role model, and we want to be an example of how to take adversity and grow with it. So once you make that decision, then we have to navigate what works the best for the individual. Because some people going to groups and discussing their adversity with other people that have things in common, that works wonders. And then there's some people that are a little more introverted, and that makes them uncomfortable, gives them more anxiety. So there's other facets for them. There's so many online support groups. There's so many wonderful self-help books out there. There's amazing counselors and life coaches. So number one, I would do that. Get yourself hooked up with a counselor and a group. Whatever spirituality makes you tick, whether it's meditation, whether it's church, whether it's something else, but being able to have that when you're alone, that peace, finding that peace. Sometimes I'll do a healing touch, like guided meditation with someone, just trying to slow my brain down, trying to calm it down. Because that can be a challenge. And I'd say that is a good start. And then you kind of navigate, okay, this worked well, this didn't really work well. This person I know went through tragic adversity. I'm gonna find out what they did and maybe try that. And it's a process and it's a journey. For me personally, I feel I'll be doing my whole life.
It sounds like a resounding thing that I'm hearing from you, regardless of whether somebody is more of an extroverted individual who benefits mainly from healing in a group setting, or they're more introverted and benefits from one-on-one. It sounds like the foundation for everything is a support system. No matter what that looks like for each individual person. Do you think that that's a pivotal thing when you're trying to heal from something, and that it's not necessarily something that you can do on your own without any support?
I do, and I think that our natural tendency when we're feeling depressed or if we have anxiety is to isolate.
Definitely.
And so that is the challenge there, is the strongest advice is to not isolate, but our natural instinct wants to isolate. And so if you're having a day, I'm not going to say always to put yourself out there either. Have that time on your own each day if that brings you peace and you can regroup in any way that you want. Or if it's a day that you just are going to say no matter how much people are trying to talk you into socializing, promise yourself that the next day will then be different. And so there's a fine line between perspective and validation. And I have to watch that too, because I was raised with perspective from my father. Well, keep it in perspective, keep it in perspective. It can always be worse, it can always be worse. And even though that's true, some days we just need to validate ourselves.
I agree.
We're human beings. And when we were driving to my wedding, when I was 23 years old, and we drove past my mom's cemetery, and I had tears in my eyes, and I said to my dad, Mom should be here today. And I said, I'm 21 is too young to lose your mom. And he said, well, a lot of kids lose their mom at 5, and a lot of kids lose their mom at 10. So that's how I was raised, which is why, one of my books is Stress and the Power of Perspective. I truly believe it, but there is a fine line between perspective and validation, and we need to validate others and validate ourselves as well.
Definitely. I get the benefit of the mentality of recognizing the level of pain that other people experience in relationship to yours. At the same time, though, I feel like that can have you minimizing your experience and minimizing your feelings. And
absolutely.
And that's speaking as an adult who is healing from that. That's a dangerous thing to get into, because you can almost get into this mode, and once again speaking from personal experience, where you won't let yourself acknowledge the extent to which you've been hurt, which I think inhibits your ability to heal from things when you can't fully allow yourself to look at it and say, okay, yes, well, I understand that other people in the world also go through terrible things. This was terrible,
This was
and
terrible.
it's
And we're
okay to
human.
acknowledge it. Exactly.
We're human with
Exactly.
human feelings and a human heart and a human brain and a human subconscious mind when we sleep. And so we can only do so much. And if we just completely disregard it or sweep it under the rug, there's going to be those repressed feelings that just aren't good. So as a life coach and a counselor and a speaker, I do have to navigate that all the time. There's two groups that I spoke to that I had a really tough time talking about perspective. And one of them I spoke to pancreatic cancer patients, and it was a support group, and I was not going to tell them, it could be worse, it can always be worse. Sure, maybe it could have with them, and they could be alone, not have family, there's all kinds of things, but that's pretty bad. And they needed validation at that moment. And the other group were vets and active military personnel. I'm about to go off to fight. And I'm not in their shoes. Who am I to tell them to keep it in perspective?
Right.
So I'm constantly trying to find that balance to help others, to make sure that I am pointing out perspective, which I truly believe in, but also validating them and figuring out that fine line.
It's definitely a fine line. So you went to school for education and ended up working for Toledo Public Schools for 17 years. And thinking about what you were saying earlier, when you were going through your trauma and having educators in your own life who didn't really quite know what to do with you, it makes me firmly believe that you were perfectly positioned to work in the education system, because I can imagine that you were able to very positively impact a lot of students because you have a unique perspective, and being able to look at a student as a very well-rounded look, and not so much they're just screwing up, and being able to look at them and see, okay, well, something's going on here, but something's going on here. We need to do some further digging. So what was your experience at TPS like, and how did it inform your decision to go back to college to obtain a degree in school counseling?
Well, I promised myself when I was a second grader that I would be a teacher, because I wanted to be a better teacher than the ones I had. And it was something that I never deviated from. But I did go into it for the wrong reasons. I should have gone into counseling from the start. But so I would put the chairs in a little circle and we'd do our little counseling session. And I never got through my teaching manuals at the end of the year because I was always counseling the kids all day. And I wanted to work in the inner city, so I worked in the north end of Toledo. That was a non-negotiable for me. I did not personally feel I would be able to validate the problems from students that maybe didn't experience such life adversity. And I knew that those problems were real problems to those kids, say in Sylvania or Perrysburg or whatnot. But I didn't think I would validate them like I should, and I felt I could make more of a difference in the north end. So I worked at Riverside Elementary as a teacher, and then I kind of got slapped on the hand a few times for counseling without a degree. I would go to the CSI at the time and talk to kids that were there and go to their homes and try to work with their parents. And so I went back and I did what I was told, and I got a degree in school counseling, and I was at Woodward High School, which was fantastic. But as a high school counselor, it's a lot of scheduling and testing and administrative. So I really still didn't feel like I was getting the one-to-one counseling, talking about these kids' adversity like I wanted to. So then I thought, well, who gets to talk to the bad kids? The principal. So I went back to school and I got a degree in administration, and I became a principal. And I did get to counsel more in that role than as a school counselor. But it's still, something was missing where I kind of beat to my own drum, and things got really strict where if it's raining and a kid's walking in the rain, you can't pick them up and you can't take them on rewards, and you can't, this is a Sue Happy society, and I understand why it got that way, but staying after school for a kid that needed help was looked down upon and things like that. So I decided to go into private practice, and that's when I started getting the idea about Serenity.
I love it. I'm just thinking about my own experience as a student, thinking about elementary through high school, and I experienced some situations with educators where there was some writing off of, well, we don't really know what to do, kind of a thing. And if they would have dug a little bit, that probably would have made a difference. So it makes my heart feel really warm, because I think there aren't enough educators like you who will look at a child for everything that they are, and not just for the behavioral issues that are there. So I can just imagine the long-standing impact that you had while you were in TPS.
Oh, and they still call me.
I was gonna say, I'm sure you've heard feedback, but probably in ways that you don't even know, ways that you've impacted students, and probably in some life-saving ways.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Actually, I just got a letter last month of somebody that had heard me on the radio or something, and she was a student, and said that, I saved, that she was going to commit suicide, and I made her feel special and talked to her, and I get letters like that all the time now. And with social media, people will have, a little quote about their favorite teacher, and somebody put my name, and then a lot of old students came out of the woodwork and just commented on ways on how, and that was pretty heartwarming. That was last year, and they call me, and I get invited to their weddings, and the fifth graders are, now this is really gonna age me, but they're in their mid-30s, so yeah, it's been great. I feel, even sadly, funerals. I went to a funeral, and the mother, said, you have no idea how much you impacted my child, and so it's a warm fuzzy for sure. I felt awesome. Bad transitioning, but my time there was, I think, how long it was supposed to be for me to pursue my next journey and help people in other ways.
So looking at the fact that everything that you'd been through up until that point, including the education system experience, led you to open Serenity in 2010. So why was it important to you that the center exists, and what is it like for you to see people positively impacted by this amazing thing that you've started?
To start, I really wanted to bring something super cool to Toledo. And instead of opening something smaller in someone else's establishment, I just wanted to go all out. And it was a risk. People were like, you are bringing a wellness center to unhealthy Toledo? And I said, it's not all about that. I mean, my initial meeting, I think I went to Five Guys. Like, I like my burgers. And I mean, we're not, just because you go to a wellness center or you like to work on your mental health or your overall health, doesn't mean, I think people have this judgment of, that you're like this.
Well, and most people, I think when they think wellness center, they, like you're saying, they have a very specific idea in their head. So just to share a little bit, can you share the different services that Serenity offers? Because I have been so impressed. I love that you call it a wellness center, because in my opinion, that perfectly encompasses everything, because with the services that you offer, you're literally tackling health in a variety of standpoints, not just physical health,
right,
but emotional, mental, spiritual health.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad I own a salon now, because I always had to have a disclaimer, nothing against salons, but we are not a salon, because it was very important for me to have a haven that people could come into with dim lighting and soft music and waterfalls. And there's been people that said they just came in to buy a gift certificate for somebody, and they walked out just feeling better. Atmosphere is just so imperative. And our bread and butter is massage therapy. And we offer all kinds of massages, from very therapeutic wellness, workers' comp, sports massage, rehab massage, to hot stone and relaxation, Swedish, people celebrating their anniversaries and birthdays. So a whole realm of different massages. And then aesthetics with the facials and peels and some beautification services, but really focusing on skincare and skin cancer prevention and all of our organic skincare products, have sunscreen and things like that. And then we have yoga and acupuncture. We have a chiropractor, infrared sauna, foot detox, reflexology, Reiki. We have lots of classes along with the yoga class, and other, add-on services with those services. And then we opened the nail salon on the same street a few buildings down.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So a wide variety of services to really fit what anyone needs. I know from my own personal experience walking into Serenity as someone who deals with anxiety, the environment is perfect because like you said, atmosphere is such a huge part of it.
Yep.
And when you can simply walk into a place and instantly feel your body relax a little bit, feel your mind relax a little bit, I think that speaks a lot to the place itself, even before you get into being able to experience the actual services.
Right, which is why I didn't want salon services going on during our holistic health services, and I didn't want it. We also have the clinical counseling and life coaching, and walking into more of, I didn't want a clinical setting either. Even though we pride ourselves that we're a holistic medical facility, we did not want it looking like a medical facility.
It doesn't. So you've succeeded.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you're a prolific motivational speaker and often speak to audiences of 1,000 or more. What drove you to want to share your message to the world?
Well, I would say 3 things. First and foremost, I found that I am extremely an empath, and I couldn't really function doing individual counseling all day. I couldn't figure out how to put up that boundary. And I
love that you're saying all this.
Really? Are we even more relatable?
Empaths unite. I understand that.
And it was, I get goosebumps. It was, I would literally just be up all night, and I'd ask my husband, how do people do this all day long, Because, and when we work with children, it's different, and it's very short, and there's so many of them, but when you're working with one person every week, for months at a time sometimes, and you can't make their cancer go away, or you can't make their significant other come back to them, or you're there for support therapy, but I'm a fixer and I want to fix them, and I couldn't, and I would start adopting even some of their symptoms, and it was very, very hard for me. And my husband would say, well, you have to figure out how to look at it as a job and then walk away.
That's a very hard thing to do as an empath because you're just
impossible.
Absorbing people's emotions. So I get that. That's a really hard thing to figure out. How do you put those boundaries into place when you're really actively listening to them and you can't help but take on what they're going through?
Yeah, I would have to go home and sleep, and I wouldn't even take on a full load of clients because I was running Serenity. So even just a few, it was very, very hard for me. So that's one reason. And then the other reason, when I worked for Toledo Public, I was pulled to do some in-services and professional developments for hundreds of people at a time. And I would tie in what I do, which is humor and real life analogies and audience participation. And I was very comfortable up there, which I don't know where that came from because I used to hate speaking in front of people. I literally skipped a whole chunk of a prayer in my sister-in-law's wedding because I couldn't breathe and I couldn't read anymore and so I don't know where it came from, but it could be part of the empath. I absorb, maybe, I don't know.
It sounds too like you're someone who very clearly has a defined purpose. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you can be the most fearful person in the world of public speaking. Yeah. But when you have that clear purpose and that clear why, that fuels something inside of you that makes whatever your message is feel important enough that it somehow helps you push through that barrier of insecurity and fear.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like adrenaline, but in a different...
Exactly,
It gives you superpowers, but... Yeah, so I did these in-services with Toledo Public, and people would just line up and say, you're missing your calling, and you need to be doing this, and I didn't want you to stop talking, and I hate these things normally. And so that combined with thirdly, one time I spoke and there was about 1,000 people, about 1,200 people. And I remember thinking, I spoke for an hour, and my foundation is stress maintenance, work-life balance, resilience. And I remember thinking, all of these people have a problem, or have been through adversity, or are going through adversity at varying levels, because we all have. And I was just able to help 1,200 people in a 60-minute period. And I don't know their individual problems that I'm gonna walk away taking with me, but I know that they have them. So I still was able to speak from my heart and passionately. And I helped 1,200 people in the same amount of time that I could help one person in a 60-minute period at Serenity. So that's how I transitioned out of individual counseling and into being a motivational speaker. So then I went with it, and once in a while I'll have old clients that need a little tune-up and they really just want to talk to me, and that's fine. But overall, I don't do the individual anymore, and that's what really pushed me into doing this as a career.
That has to be incredible, being able, obviously it's amazing anytime you can positively impact a single person, but to be able to have that reach that extends so much further, it kind of like with your time in the education system, I'm sure that there are people in situations that you've positively impacted that you will probably never know, but the ripple is out there.
Yes.
Yeah. So for the past 7 years, you've been appearing in a regular weekly segment of the Denny Schaefer morning radio show on WRQN, which is 93.5 FM here in Toledo, called Life Coach Tuesdays with Dr. D, where people call or text in questions seeking advice in their personal lives. What has it been like to have this as a consistent platform to help people? And is there a specific question that sticks out in your mind during that segment?
Yes, there is. But so what it's been like, it's surprising that people really feel like it helps them. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to the show or the bit, but I just always felt like it was more fun and it was so quick, and how could I really help people with one quick answer?
Sure.
But for example, Wednesday, I took a friend to his back surgery, and at the end of the day, the nurse said, I knew that voice. You're Dr. D, aren't you? Oh, you give such common sense advice, and I love listening to it. My friends love listening to it. And she was so complimentary, and I get that a lot. And so it's a wonderful thing that I'm actually helping people. And I mean, I'll be honest, every single decision of my life isn't to help people. I have other things I do for other reasons, for fun or for whatever. And when I first went into that agreement with the radio station, I thought, well, this is gonna be mutually beneficial. It's this entertainment clip.
Yeah.
And I'll get to talk about Serenity when we have specials or our nonprofit, and I'll get to throw some things out there, and in the meantime, people can enjoy a fun segment. So I didn't go into it thinking, but again, just like the students, I've had letters, I've had emails. That advice really changed the trajectory of what I was going to do and my relationship with my sister, or my depression, or whatever it might be. And don't get me wrong, some of it is still just entertaining, but I do think it's made a difference. So I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that it had a dual purpose.
I actually see this as being perfect for just the way this day and age is, with people's attention spans being shorter. I feel like with most radio segments, they're a little bit shorter, so I feel like this is almost the perfect opportunity to reach people who do tend to go to sources like Instagram and other social media avenues to be able to get their short amounts of advice. So to actually be able to get that from a real life person who also has the professional clinical experience, that's invaluable. So I can totally see how you would have a very wide reach with that.
Yeah, and a lot of times I'll say, oh, did you text in or did you call? And they're like, oh no, I could never do that. But I just listen to what you tell everybody else. And a lot of people, it's relatable. Whatever they're asking, there's 10 people maybe listening that want to know the same thing. They just were nervous to call in or something. But gosh, so it'll be 8 years in October.
Wow.
Every single week. So there's been a lot of questions. And I'm gonna say the one that stands out, I'm gonna say it's the very first Tuesday.
Really?
none of us really knew what to expect. And I remember I had the radio on and I'm driving there, and Denny was being Denny. And I remember hearing him say, oh, is this life coach gonna have like a super high voice and be super annoying? And he didn't realize.
really bubbly and stuff.
Yeah, super bubbly. And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go with Denny Shaver. You know, hadn't really met him in that realm. So he was uncertain that it was gonna go. I was then annoyed and I wasn't sure how it was gonna go. And the first question came, and this isn't the one that I'm gonna say stands out the most, but the first question came and it was super heavy and dark and sad. It was like, I'm 8 months pregnant and I can't get excited about this baby because I had a stillbirth 1.5 years ago and I don't know how to get excited about this pregnancy. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, so it's gonna be that kind of segment. And I gave the best advice that I could and whatnot. And then the very next question, we had a caller and he said, yeah, I'm dating this girl and I have some trust issues. She said if I lost 20 pounds, she'd get a boob job. And I lost 20 pounds and she reneged on that deal. And I don't know if I can trust her. I'm seeing some red flags. And I'm like, well, I'm seeing some red flags too, but I'm not sure it's the same flag you're seeing. So at that point, I knew, ooh, it's gonna come from all walks of life, all kinds of questions, and that's exactly how the last 8 years has been, is all kinds of questions. Yeah, so I had to basically, my first day tell somebody that he was a douchebag, and
yes, I love that
and, kind of call him out for what it was.
I see you being such an impactful person for a variety of reasons. One, your story. Two, your professional experience. But three, you're a very candid person. And I think while people want to feel loved and supported and feel empathy, I think people also want honesty. Mm-hmm. So to be a person that can not only be blatantly honest, but to at the same time make the person feel cared for and loved and genuinely listened to, that's a very specific skill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I would always say to people, I'm not getting paid to tell you what you want to hear, or I'm not here to tell you what's going to make you feel warm and fuzzy all the time. And I want you to get to the point that you don't need me anymore. And therefore,
that's good. I
have to be honest with you and candid with you. I'm going to bring it most of the time with care and compassion, but it is difficult to bring that tough love sometimes and that honesty, or point out contradictions when someone says one thing and they're trying to help themselves and I'm trying to help them. It is finding another fine line.
To me, that's a sign of a good leader, though, because you recognize that whoever you're helping, you don't want them to be dependent on you for the rest of their lives. And so to have that goal to give them the tools that they need to be able to thrive and not be 100% dependent on you, that to me is a sign of a good leader.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I try.
You're welcome. So let's talk about Dr. Dietra Hickey, the published author.
Okay.
Because you've put out some incredible books that I'm so excited to read. So thank you again for gifting those.
You're welcome.
So you've released 3 books that tackle the topics of stress maintenance, resilience, and work-life balance, which, especially in this day and age, are incredibly valuable pieces of information to have. Also, the Superwoman Syndrome and overall mental health and wellness. What made you decide to write each of these books?
Well, I wish all of my answers could be super inspiring. I wrote the books mainly because of my public speaking career.
Okay,
and
that's fair.
If you are an author, you are more likely to get certain gigs and to be able to have credibility for yourself. So being an author wasn't something I always wanted to do, but especially with, I don't know, so much going online and things like that people can read. I mean, people still read books, I know, but I mainly just took what I say on stage, elaborated, really broke it down with everything that I've been feeling. It wasn't a release for myself or like journaling for myself. It was really just to put something concrete in people's hands, and also so that I can get more opportunities to get on stage or get in front of a conference room and speak to people and say what I want to say to them and help them.
Well, whether or not this was any part of your intention with writing them initially, the beautiful thing that I see with each of these works that you've written is breaking down barriers for people, because as you know, not everybody can afford to pay a ticket to go to an event. Not everybody is capable of the transportation requirements to get to an event, or even have the time to do that. So to essentially provide them with a gift where I recognize that you may have some barriers in being able to see me speak publicly, but here I'm going to literally give you the roadmap to what I would be telling you in person. To me, what it just shows that you're breaking down barriers and making what you have to offer accessible to more people.
Yes, I definitely have found benefits now after I have written them, and after I wrote the first one, it motivated me to write the second and the third, because you're exactly right. Or it's oftentimes people that are there and they're like, I really want, my mother needs to read this, or my friend, or I have someone I need to give this to. And it really helps spread the word on what we're all trying to accomplish here. And it is, some people are just more comfortable with that type of therapy as well.
Absolutely.
And so, it's really been a good thing. And I actually have a fourth one that I'm working on right now. So, it's an extension of the second one, which is called We All Have a Story. And it's all about blind empathy and how to build relationships and strengthen connections. And it ended up being way too long, that book. So that's one part on building relationships with other people. And the second part, which is now going to be a second book, is the relationship you have with yourself.
Well, I'm excited to read the first one, but I'm also excited to read the second one, because what you just described with that is exactly what we're trying to do with this, is building relationships. So I'm very excited to read that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
It came from, if I can tell a little story just on the background.
Please do.
From
Yeah,
it.
please do.
It's a little dark, but
we're very real here.
Yeah,
dark is okay.
It's a little dark, but it was actually the day that my mother passed away. And I wasn't really sure what to do. I was 21 years old and she was at home, and I called 911, and they told me I'm not supposed to call 911, I'm supposed to call the coroner's office. So fun fact, I guess. And so they said they would call for me, and it took quite a while. And I got my mom changed, and I combed her hair, and I was laying with her and kind of going through my own back and forth, like, wait a second, no, she is breathing, no, she's not. And then the coroner's office finally came and they took her away, and I got into adult mode at that point, and I'm like, I need to start planning the funeral. My mom, she lost so much weight, she has nothing to wear, I need to get out of this house. And I went to a department store, and I was, looking a hot mess, and I remember thinking, nobody asked me if I needed any help. Nobody approached me. I walked past a couple people and nobody said hello. I had my head down, baseball hat, bumped into somebody. I said, excuse me, they didn't say anything back. And it was very busy and people were walking past, and I just stopped and I watched them, and I remember thinking, if I had a sign, if I was wearing a sign that said, the last 2 hours I was just laying with my mother who had just passed away, how much better people would have treated me, and how nice they would have been to me, and how people would have said hello, and the person working at the department store would have rushed to ask me if I needed help. And at that moment, it changed my life. And it didn't change it in a way that I need everybody to know what I'm going through. It changed my blind empathy and realizing that you're not wearing a sign, and that person's not wearing a sign, and what would their sign say? And all of a sudden, this compassion, this blind compassion came about, and just, if we all wore a sign, how much better we would all treat one another, how much less judgmental we would be because someone's different than us. And all of these things, if we knew their story, and we don't. So I tell my staff at Serenity, my front desk staff, I want you imagining every single client is wearing a sign that has adversity, what they're going through now, because they probably are or they have been through. And I want you treating them as if they're wearing that sign. It doesn't always, where we go. I mean, obviously we're human and life happens, and I'm not trying to act like Mother Teresa here, but I do think that I have this compassion for people in general, regardless, until they give me reason not to. And I think it's kind of unfortunately flipped sometimes, where I am going to have a wall up, or I'm going to be a little judgy, or I don't necessarily like you until you give me reason to. So I'm trying to flip the order.
Reverse that process.
There.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So that is the basis of that book, that we all have a story.
I love that. I think it's so easy for people in general to look at those that we come into contact with and to just take everything at face value. So I love that idea of blind empathy, because it just promotes the fact that there are so many layers to who we are as people, and there's always an explanation for why someone maybe presents in a negative light. And so to be able to look at them and look beyond the surface and what you're seeing and what they're putting out, and recognize, okay, this person might be putting out some negativity, but it's probably because there's something deeper going on below the surface.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So to close this out, what piece of advice would you give to those in our community who are wanting to make a positive change, or maybe flip a negative experience that they've currently been entrenched in, but they just simply don't know where to start to pull themselves out of that and move toward making some positive improvements? What advice would you give?
My advice would be to not try to take everything that we're saying and implement a ton of different things at once, because then we're setting ourselves up for failure. It is and that's why life coaches and people like that are really important, because they can help you navigate the steps to take. So my advice would be to find that one thing, whether it's the one thing keeping you up at night, or the one thing that's happening now that you need to tackle or work on. Are you having trouble getting motivated to go to work, or building relationships, or sleeping? Whatever that might be, find that one thing that you want to improve the most, and the one thing that is causing you to not be able to reach your goals. And that's two things to identify. And then find a support in some way, whether it's an individual support, a group, and it could be a friend that you're just very comfortable with. I don't want to take away from a counseling degree by any means, but a lot of people are just wired that way, to be able to help others and be compassionate.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter who you're comfortable with. If they help you, spend more time with them. If there's people that are draining your bucket or pulling your energy out of you, you have to distance yourself a little bit. And so that would be my advice, is to not wait until tomorrow, or next week, or once this deadline is done, or once I get back from vacation, but today, to start today. And even if it's very tiny, and set up small goals so that you can pat yourself on the back. We're our own worst enemies. We're our own worst critics.
I agree.
I challenge people, and you said if I want to talk to them directly, look at the camera.
Yeah,
So I
please do.
challenge you, when was the last time you looked in the mirror and you actually patted yourself on the back and said, good job, you're doing an amazing job? Or are you too busy focusing on what you haven't accomplished, or your to-do list that isn't done yet, or what you don't have instead of what you have? Every day, look yourself in the mirror and talk to yourself how your best friend would describe you, and pat yourself on the back, because you're doing it. Give yourself a little more credit. We're so hard on ourselves.
Yes, we are.
So if we really spend that time to honor ourselves, give ourselves a little grace, then that's the first step.
I love that. That was amazing advice.
Oh, thank you.
Deetra, thank you so much for doing this and
Yes,
for being
thank
here.
you.
This is the longest I've ever gotten to talk with you, and I'm so glad that we got to do this. I feel like I
Yeah.
learned so much about you, and your compassion and your empathy and your kindness and your expertise just shows and exudes when you talk. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being willing to share.
Thank you, friend.
Yeah,
I
oh my
appreciate
gosh,
it.
absolutely. If you will, once again, please look at that camera and tell people how they can connect with you on the interwebs. And if there's any speaking engagement or project or anything related to Serenity that you would like to promote from the mid-August on.
All right. Well, you can reach me at Serenity Health and Wellness Center in Maumee, or Serenity Nail Salon and Spa. We have a landing page, serenitymaumee.com, and you can reach me through that realm. And as far as my speaking engagements, I am usually hired by private organizations to speak at leadership conferences or holiday parties or whatever it might be, professional developments. So there's not a lot of public engagements, but if you or your organization or company would like a motivational speaker to come to your group, then reach out to me at Serenity, or my speaking website is deetrahickey.com.
Wonderful. Well, to all of you who are watching and listening today, thank you so much for tuning in once again with us. If you aren't already following us on social media, you can follow us on both Instagram and Facebook at Heart of Glass the Pod. You can listen to each podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you're more of a person who likes to watch the podcast, you can watch on either YouTube or Facebook. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Please stay tuned at the end of this episode to watch a preview of next week's episode featuring Cassidy Ladd. And for all of you, once again, just thank you so much for tuning in with us and learning a little bit more about another awesome human who makes up the heartbeat of the Glass City. We'll see you again next time.